Welcome to this video in which we're going to walk through assignment number 3 for CSE 598-494, Design for Learning in Virtual Worlds. For this assignment, you're going to want to open up the Tropical Island project that you created for your first assignment for the class. In this assignment and in upcoming assignments, we're going to continue to add new elements to the Tropical Island that you've already created. In this assignment, we're going to add a 3D model to our virtual world. We're going to learn about prefabs, and we're going to learn a bit about animations that you can associate with objects inside your virtual world. In order to complete this assignment, you're going to need to import a package of assets that are associated with the Unity book that we have for class. I have placed the Unity package of assets up onto the Blackboard site, and you can download that package from there. To find that package of Unity assets, go to the Blackboard site for our class, and then go into the Unity Units folder, and scroll all the way down toward the bottom, and there you'll see Unity resource files from the book, and that includes our book assets Unity package. Download that to your local computer, noting where you choose to save it. Once you've downloaded it, then inside Unity you can go to Assets and choose Import Package, and then Custom Package. Then navigate on your machine to the place where the book assets Unity package is stored. Choose Open. All the materials will be decompressed that are inside that package. And this will take a minute. Once they're all decompressed, you'll see a list of all of the assets that are in that package, and we're going to import all of them, so you can simply click on the Import button. When you do that, it will take a while for Unity to bring all of those objects into your project. Once they're in there, make sure to save your project. And also, it's important when you are working on this assignment to create a new scene specific to this assignment so that you have a safe copy of the scene you made for your earlier project. In fact, each time you make any significant changes to a Unity project, it's a good idea to rename a scene just so that you have a local backup of your previous work. I've already done that. In my case, I've created a scene called Island 2. To take a look at those assets that I just imported, if I now look in my project view under the Assets folder, you'll see I've got the standard assets. These are the ones I brought in when I created the project for assignment number 1. And now I've got a new folder called Book Assets, which itself includes folders for models, sounds, and textures. The first thing we're going to do for this assignment is make some modifications to the 3D model that we're going to place into our tropical island space. The model that we're going to be working with in this assignment is called Outpost. So in your Assets folder, look to the Book Assets and then Models, and then look at your Assets list and click on the Outpost model. Now right now this Outpost model is itself a prefab, and we're going to make a few changes to this prefab before we actually import it into our project. So let's do that now. If I look in the inspector for Outpost, I'm going to click on the Model tab, and I'm going to look at where it says Scale Factor. I want to increase the scale of my model a little bit to make it work well with the first-person controller that we've already placed inside our tropical island on the previous assignment. So I'm going to set the scale factor to 1.5. Also, I want to check that the Generate Colliders checkbox is checked. that will allow our first-person controller to run into the 3D model of this building without running through it. Once I've set those two, then I'll click on Apply, and that will resize the model. Next, we're going to work with the Animations tab to apply a set of animations to the model that will be used in Unity. And where do these animations come from? When the model of the building was created in a 3D modeling application, the animations were created inside that application. When we bring the model into Unity, we need to tell Unity something about those animations so that we can make use of them in our project. So let's do that now. With the Animations tab selected, I'm going to scroll down in the inspector toward the bottom to the section that says Default Take, and then you'll see a little timeline. Here's where I can define specific animations based on the original animations that were created in the 3D modeling program. In this case, I'm going to rename the animation that's currently called Default Take as Idle. Then I can set its beginning and ending frames, again based on how it was created in the 3D modeling program. In this case, our idle state is going to begin on frame 1 and it's going to end on frame 2. The only other thing I need to worry about for now is to check and make sure that the wrap mode for this animation take is set to default. There are several different types, and occasionally we will be using the loop wrap mode, but for now we can just set the animation to be default. Then I'll hit Apply. Now I'm going to come up to our clips and I'm going to click on the plus arrow to add a new animation take. This one is going to be called Door Open. It's also going to begin on frame 1, but it's going to end on frame 15. And again, the wrap mode will be default. Finally, I'll add one more animation clip. I'll rename it Door Shut. This one is going to begin on frame 16, and it's going to end on frame 31. Again, the wrap mode will be default. And I'll click Apply. Once all that is done, I now have my prefab ready for use inside my Unity project. So now I can drag an instance of that prefab out onto my island. When you do this, I want you to place your building on the island on a flat location near the end of the trail if you'd made a trail. If you haven't made a trail, please do so that goes from one of the beach areas on your island and then stops somewhere near your volcano. So I'll click and drag my outpost and drop it down onto my island. I'm also going to position it a little bit. Right now I've got it on the end of my trail, but it's sort of facing away from the trail, so I'm going to rotate it around. And I'm going to come in and take a good close look to make sure that it's sitting nicely on the ground and that the ground underneath it is flat. If the ground under your building is not flat, you can use your terrain tools to flatten out that terrain around it. Also, if you happen to place your building inside some grass that you made on the earlier assignment, remember that you can erase grass from the island by selecting that tool in the terrain palette and then holding down the Shift key over existing clumps of grass, and that will delete them off of the island. Now let's start to work on our outpost building. Now I mentioned that you're welcome to move your outpost around to position it nicely on the island. I want to take that back a little for now. With what we're about to do with our building, it will be easiest if the rotation of your outpost is set to 0, 0, 0. So if you've got it rotated to something else, for now, stick it to 0, 0, 0, and then you can move it around once we're done messing with it. The first thing I'm going to do is expand out the outpost object and select the door child object. I want to replace the collider that is on that door now, which is a mesh collider, with a simpler collider, a box collider. And here's how I can do that. I select the door, I go to Component and choose Physics, and then choose Box Collider. And there it is. It will dutifully add it to our door. We don't need both forms of collider, so I can select the mesh collider and choose Remove Component, and then I'll just simply have the box collider around my door. While I still have this door child object selected, I want to be able to play a door opening sound when the player runs into that door. To do that, I'm going to add another component. This is going to be an audio source component, and that will allow our door to play a sound later on. You'll see in the inspector that we now have an audio source section and a place where we can attach an audio clip to our door. Next, I'm going to select the entire outpost building, and here too I'm going to add a box collider. So I select the whole object, choose Component, Physics, and Box Collider, and that will create a little 1x1x1 box collider sort of right hidden inside my building model. Unlike the collider we just attached to our door, this is going to be a trigger, meaning that we don't want the first-person controller to actually be stopped when it collides with this new box collider. Instead, we simply want the fact that the player controller runs into the box collider to be registered so that it creates an event that we can then react to through code. To make that happen, I'll come to the box collider section of the inspector and choose Is Trigger. Next, I'm going to reshape and reposition this trigger that we've just placed inside our building. What we're going to do is create a trigger area where the player controller will run into that trigger area, which will then trigger an animation that will open the door to the building, which in turn will play a sound of the door opening. It's awfully hard to see the collider that we've attached to our building. However, if you hold down the Shift key on your keyboard, you will be able to just see that little box collider through its drag handles that now appear around its edges. And in fact, we're going to make use of those drag handles to resize and reposition this trigger box. That's why I had us set our rotation to 0, 0, 0, because it makes it easy for us to look at each side of our building to help position that box collider. So to do that, first of all, I'm going to go ahead and look at my building from the front. Hold down the Shift key. Then I can reach in and just grab one of those little grab bars and use it to drag my collider to about the height of the door and about the width of the door as well. I can change views to the side and hold down the Shift key, and I'll notice that this collider is not positioned anywhere that would allow the player coming from the outside to collide with it. So I'm going to grab this little bar here and I'm going to drag it so that it comes out a bit from the front of the building. Meanwhile, inside the building, I'm going to shrink it down a little bit and move it towards that door so that when the player is inside the building and they approach the door, they will again trigger the animation to open the door. Finally, I'll look at the scene from the top just to check that it looks about right. And it appears to be positioned and shaped well to allow the player to run into it. Take one more look around from the side. Goes down a little bit below the ground, which is fine, doesn't really matter, but I'll shrink it up anyway. And I can see it's a little wider than it needs to be, so I'll shrink it down again so that it fits the door. Now we are going to create some scripts and attach them to our outpost so that we can cause this trigger zone to react to the first-person controller. So come down to your project view and choose Create. Choose JavaScript to create a new script. Rename your script. This first one that we're going to create is going to be called Trigger Zone. Double-click to open that script inside MonoDevelop. Then you can go to the course Blackboard site to grab that script. You don't have to write it up yourself. It's already available for you on the Blackboard site. So on our course Blackboard site, if you go into the Unity Units folder, and come down to Unit 4, there you'll see we've got a door manager script and a trigger zone script. So you can click to open up that trigger zone script. It's very short. And copy it. And then come back into MonoDevelop and simply replace the code that's there with this new code. And it's very simple. It has a single function which is called onTriggerEnter, which does just what it sounds like. It detects when something collides with that trigger. And then it also can detect what it is that is colliding with the trigger. In this case, we want to see whether or not what's collided with our trigger zone has the name of player. And if it does have the name player, then we are going to find the door child object within our outpost model and send it a message, which is door check, which is obviously calling another function that we have yet to write. So save that and close it down and come back into Unity. So let's take this trigger zone script that we have just created, and we're going to drag it onto the outpost object, the topmost level of this outpost object. Now if I click on it, I'll see that I now have this trigger zone script. It has no public variables associated with it, so there's nothing to set up. It is important, however, to check my first person controller, because if you remember, this trigger zone script is going to be looking for a tagged object called player. And right now our first person controller has no tag. It is untagged. Therefore I need to tag it as player. So I'll click on the tag drop-down box and select player. Now our first person controller is tagged as player. Next, let's create another script. So we go to Project, Create, and choose JavaScript. This script is going to be called Door Manager. So again, double-click to open that in MonoDevelop. And meanwhile, you can come to the course Blackboard site, back to that same folder where you found the trigger zone script, and open up the Door Manager script. And select everything in it, copy it, come into MonoDevelopment, and paste it into your Door Manager script. I'm going to walk through this very briefly. Here we've got a couple of private variables being declared. One is to check whether or not the door is open. Another one is to set a timer for how long it's going to take for the animation to play. Then we have some public variables. We've got another one that lets us choose how long it is for the door to stay open before it shuts. And then a couple of audio clips that we can pass to this function that will play when the door opens and when the door closes. We've got a start function that sets our timer to 0. We've got an update function that checks whether the door is open. And then if it is, it will count up to whatever this time is set to here, and then it will close the door and play the door shut sound, and then reset our timer. We've got a door check function that checks whether the door is open or not. And then we have a function simply called door, which plays the sound associated with the door, checks to see whether the door is open or not, and then plays the appropriate animation. So save all of that, and then close it down and return into Unity. This time we're going to take this Door Manager script and we're going to attach it to the door child object. You remember that's where we attached that original box collider. So let's grab that and drop it right on top of the door child object. Now we can look over at this door manager script, and we can see that we can just leave the open time to 3 as is, but we're looking for a pair of sounds to associate with the door opening and closing. To find those sounds, go to your Book Assets folder in the project view, come down to the Sounds subfolder, and then you'll see all of the sounds that came in with that package, including a door shut that we'll click and drag over to the door shut sound, and a door open that we'll click and drag to the door open section. At this point, save your scene and click play to try it out. Now you'll want to position your first-person controller close to your building if you didn't have it close to your building already, so that you don't have to walk the entire island to get to this building. So here we are. If I walk up to that door, I enter the trigger zone, I hear a sound and an animation plays that opens up the door, gives me time to enter in, and then it closes down again. Then from inside, when I hit that same trigger space, the door opens, allowing me to walk back out again. And that's it for this second assignment. As with all of your assignments that you do for this class, I'm showing you the very basics of putting together the assignment. I encourage you, I urge you, I invite you to add other elements to the assignment. Make this your own personalized island. Once you've got everything completed, as I mentioned earlier, now's the time where it makes sense to go in and move your building around to position it well on the island. So I'm sort of facing in an odd direction, so I might come and grab my outpost building and face it towards the trail rather than away from the trail, and then position it sort of at the edge of the trail as well. That's it. So once you have completed your assignment, do the usual. Please save it out as a web player and submit both the Unity 3D file and the HTML file, of course checking to make sure that it runs on your own machine.